I don't support the bill.
Has expired.
Mr Speaker.
Ron Mark.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, I start with a little mixed emotion here because I have to say I'm a little bit annoyed with Stuart Nash, the Labor Party, because one of the reasons I decided to give up my position of the mayoralty of Carterton, a position that I absolutely loved and cherished, was because of what this government did in 2012 with the Local Government Act, and a realisation that local government was not being listened to, that local government was being abused by a particular minister who held the portfolio at the time, and unfairly, unjustifiably stigmatised, demonised in order to ram through that legislation that sought to achieve the National Party's objectives, that being local government needed less government, less councils, and bigger was better, and it was going to come by hell or by crook or by crook methods. Let's put it that way. Hell or high water, they were going to do that. As the mayor, it astonished me to hear card-carrying members of the National Party who were solid, hard-working councillors, deputy mayors and mayors being described by the national government as being lazy, incompetent, incapable of running their communities, couldn't run a balanced budget, ran up deficits. Excuse me? In the time that I was out of the House, this government has racked up, what, $83 billion, $86 billion in debts? And yet every year Carterton runs a surplus. Every year Carterton runs a balanced budget and runs, over the last 4 years, has actually run a surplus. This government, in fact, central government, very rarely, if ever, has run a balanced budget, if ever. And then we sat there and we watched the disaster that was the Auckland Super City. And what was interesting was a year or so after it had happened, having corporate people come to us and say, you know, we believe what the government was telling us about super cities being good and costs being lowered and rates going down, but one who was a CEO of a very major international firm with a head office in Auckland said, but in 1 year our rates have gone up 22%. So the bottom started to fall out of it. And now what are we seeing? Well, Rodney wanted out. Now Waiheke Island, the home, the bastion of, you know, the country's millionaires, the people who fund the National Party, the people who supported the National Party's amendments that removed democracy and instilled what we labelled in the Wairarapa as this is what we called it in the Wairarapa, the hostile takeover clause. This clause made it possible for the tyranny of the majority to reign over small communities. That particular amendment became the most hated amendment of everything the government did in the local act. And I'm not telling you anything from New Zealand First perspective. I'm telling you what the government's own card-carrying members of the National Party, who are councillors, regional councillors, deputy mayors and mayors all over the country, are saying. I welcome the government voting this down. I'm loving it, because I can assure the House that every speech made by every National Party, and I'm looking at my good friend over there, he's going to stand up and represent you, Waimakariri, you know, man, I'm going to have to send the speech to every councillor in rural provincial New Zealand. Every councillor, every mayor, every deputy mayor, so they can see that this government believes that getting rid of the hostile takeover clause is undemocratic. Why should Wellington City, 220,000 people, dictate to Carterton, who's been running its affairs very efficiently, consistently rated by Burl as one of the top 9 performing councils in New Zealand, Blitz Auckland, okay, why should they be dictated to by the majority? And here's one of the other bizarre things, that unintended consequences, Mr Speaker. When the government changed that act and it required people to petition for, not have it as a matter of right, not have a democratic say as a matter of right, but they had to put a petition together to get a referendum, it then made it possible for a little enclave up in the Tararua, who are an affected area, to sign that petition. 10 residences. It only needed, under the government's own silly legislation, one of them to sign that petition, and a petition was automatic, the referendum was automatic. The problem is the tyranny of the majority over some good small councils who actually, when one looks at the performance, are outperforming many of the so-called bigger is better councils. When New Zealand First supports this bill, we actually look forward to the government voting it down, and we so desperately look forward to the fallout and the consequences on the National Party in the 2017 election. Thank you for voting it down, National. You've done us well.